All right, so we'll call the meeting to order. This is the May 18th meeting of the Climate Action Advisory Board for the town of Concord. And let's see, go back to my agenda. With that, we will kick things off. Hopefully you were all able to at least take a peek at the agenda. I will share my screen here.
So technicality, a roll call of those present.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm still learning the Robert's Rules of Order, believe it or not. But all right, so with a show of hands, or maybe I can just do it by person. We can, I guess, take note of who is here. So Paul Kirshen, Warren Leon,
Sure.
Michael McAteer,
Here.
John Baldock,
Here.
Brian Krauss, and Amanda Cohn.
I'm not on the board, but I'm also here. So
I wasn't sure, so I just thought I'd call it out anyway.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. With that, then everyone is accounted for, and we do have a quorum, as Amanda said. We will start. I was going to share my screen, but give me a minute. Pull my meeting minutes out for a moment. We'll start with the meeting minutes and approval of the April 20th minutes. Hopefully you got a chance to look at those. I know they were a little bit later than normal, and that's because Amanda was juggling so many hats and graciously helped us to get those out. And actually, before I even go there, Brian, are you able to take minutes this time?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think we rolled your name over from last time. That was okay. Yeah, so Amanda pulled together some minutes. Let me
Actually, I did not get the minutes done.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
We talked about
I have to go back and
They
fix
will
them
be
up,
delayed.
so.
But we have time to do so we can look at those at our next meeting. I think should be set. So we will move forward. I keep promising to share my screen, but I can't actually talk and share my screen at the same time, I've found. So, all right. So we will send those out, and we will hopefully be able to vote to approve those at our next meeting. With regard to, I think I'll skip over availability for just a minute. With regard to our summer availability, we are obviously entered summer mode. I'll call it June, July, and August. Although June, we have the special joint meeting CSEC planned. But we were hoping that everyone could email. Maybe the best way to do it is email when you're going to be in town. When you'd be available for a summer meeting in July and August, and we will see if we do, in fact, if we can get a quorum. If not, we may need to shift those meeting dates around as a reminder that the third Wednesday. So, if you could let us know, the two of us, whether you're going to be able to make those dates or not, and if alternate dates are available, that would be great. And we'll see what we can come up with. In terms of our July and our August meeting, I'll presume that most folks will be back in town consistently in September. So with that, we did want to get a poll from the group to see the availability for either June 15th or 16th, and not having a calendar in front of me, is that a Wednesday or a Thursday? Is that true? June 15th or 16th?
Yeah.
Yes. So we
Okay.
normally meet on the 15th and CSEC usually meets the day after, so the 16th. So we thought we'd gauge availability for both. And they meet at 7 and CAB meets at 6. So we just cut it down the middle and said 6:30.
Okay, that seems reasonable. So I guess maybe the best way to do it, show of hands. You can use the Zoom feature if you want, or you can just raise your hand. Who could make June 15th at 6:30? So I have Brian, Warren, I believe myself, John, oh, and I'm missing. Okay, and Paul. And Jake is just coming online. Jake, could you make I don't even know if he can hear us yet. Okay, and that's a yes. All right. All right, did I capture everyone? I think I did. All right, now what about the 16th? Could anyone make us the 16th at 6:30? Okay, Warren, John, Brian says maybe, Paul, and Jake. Okay. All right, so we're definite for the 15th and maybe the majority for the 16th. And okay, so with that, I think we can provide feedback to Jerry and CSEC, and we'll get the date set as soon as we can so that everybody's got ample time to plan for that. All right, just a reminder, we've got, I guess the dates, I didn't have the agenda up there before, but the dates for our July and August meetings are listed there, the 20th and the 17th. So that helps hopefully to facilitate the availability question. All right, moving on. I guess before I do, any other comments or anything we need to discuss related to logistics, meeting logistics? Yeah.
Yeah, I need to leave a little early, so I'll be dropping off about
Saw that.
7:45.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for that heads up though, John. I guess one more thing from myself. We did talk about this this morning at our chairs breakfast, that if you remember, the state is allowing virtual meetings through July. So my understanding, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is after or in July, we would need to start in-person meetings. But we had a discussion today that even this month, one of the town committees had to cancel their meeting, postpone due to COVID. Enough COVID numbers on the board that they then opted to reschedule a virtual meeting. So it's still around, clearly, and so there may be some alternate provision. Matt, you don't know anything different
Well,
this time, do you?
I can just say that the legislature is looking at, extending this.
Okay.
I think all 351 Massachusetts towns signed on to trying to provide a virtual option going forward. So
Nice.
I hope that we will get something. Now, last time the extension happened the day after it expired, which created havoc.
Yeah, right. I remember that.
So yeah, so we can't count on it, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
especially with this surge, it just seems like a necessity.
Yeah, yeah. So for June, we'll be virtual, and we'll keep everyone posted on July. So, all right. With that, a couple updates for myself. So membership, we're still sort of working through that. We have a few leads, though nothing solid. We did, and I'll just say that was sort of the theme from this morning's conversation as well, that there are a number of committees that are looking for, engaged folks to join. So it's not unique to our group. We have also explored a little bit the idea of a student member, and it's not as straightforward as we would hoped, although there may be some changes coming along, not in the immediate future necessarily, but that might help us to do that. In the interim, it wouldn't help us with our committee membership per se, but I think we'd like to consider fostering relationship with some of those high school sustainability and climate groups. So looking at how we might be able to do that, just with some connections, hopefully, and or maybe inviting them to our meeting, or maybe one of us going to one of theirs. It might be both. So stay tuned for that. Unfortunately, nothing immediate, but maybe by fall we might have a couple of new members. On that note, I wanted to mention that Michael will actually be rolling off the board this month. If I'm not remembering that incorrectly. And so I just, I want to take a moment tonight to thank you for your long time membership and commitment to the committee, to the cause, to all things climate in Concord. So I don't know, can we do a little, golf clap, round of applause? I feel like it's so anticlimactic here, but I do really appreciate, and I think I speak for the whole board, on that. So I thought I'd give just a few minutes if anyone wanted to offer, words of thanks, and welcome to do that. But yeah, they very much appreciate your expertise and how you've brought that to the conversation, Michael.
Great.
So thank you.
Well, thank you. And when Amanda sent me a note saying that my term was up after 3 years, I said, where in the world did those 3 years go? Right?
And have
But
you only been on for 3 years?
3 years.
Oh,
Yeah,
really? Okay.
3
Okay.
years. And,
I feel-
just to say to everyone, this has been, from my experience, has been absolutely delightful to be working with a team so incredibly talented and passionate and smart. And I've just really, really appreciated, particularly the development phase, right? Where we've really collectively have written a really good plan.
Yeah.
I think the next 3 years will be developing the operation side and the implementation side, but we're well on our way. And I certainly want to thank everybody for teaching me a lot through this journey. And I think we're in a good place.
Yeah.
So it's been lovely.
Well, likewise, for sure. Anyone else want to share any words?
I can't believe your time's already up, Michael. Like this,
I know.
flying by, and I'm sure we should probably look at all of our the rest of our terms and when we're coming due, because I'm probably not that far behind. And as you just shared, Courtney, like we need folks to be jumping on into this committee versus terming off. So
Yeah. In
but
fact,
thank you. I don't want to distract from the thank yous to Michael for all of his great work and your insights that you've provided over the years. Really appreciate your leadership, and I know we'll continue to cross paths in the years to come. So thanks.
Michael, you've been great. I don't need to say more than that. You've been great.
Thanks.
Well, and I need to track you down now for, well, where are you going next? We've got a few openings at other boards and committees, so
Yeah.
counting on you.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, John.
I was gonna know that probably most people know this isn't Michael's only stint on town service, so he's been on a lot of committees and has done a lot of work, so
thank you.
that's appreciated.
Yeah, it definitely shows. And it's just as you said, you learned from us. I definitely learned from you. So really appreciate it. On that note, to Jake's point, I did just get a list. So we do have at least, let's see, two folks that are coming up in 2023. So I'll actually send around the list to the group so that you all know and have a idea of where you stand on that. So I think it's good for me to see that, and then for you to know, kind of where you're at. With that, I think for those of us who are continuing on, or at least for the short term, it sounds like there's some paperwork that we're going to be asked to do. You probably did it, back when you started the term, but some things that are annual renewals. So be on the lookout for that. That'll be coming, I believe, from the town clerk soon. All right, go back to where am I? Hold on a moment. There we go.
Can I ask, is it appropriate if we put the word out through our personal networks with LinkedIn or whatever, to say if you live in Concord and are interested, we're looking for members?
Oh, it's such a good question. I
Yes,
would
absolutely.
think so. Yeah, but I mean, Matt,
and not just for climate action, but any town board committee.
do we have a list? Should we probably
there is a list I can provide. Yes,
okay.
Every time that we have our select board meeting, we have a list of the open positions, but because this is the change of the fiscal year and people are terming out of different boards and committees, frankly, anyone pretty much has an opening.
Has it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay. Yeah.
it's kind of a smorgasbord right now. Whatever you like. You can eat.
Any update on the green, I guess, is that the right color?
Oh, now we call them
green card
volunteer
process,
cards.
volunteer card process. Any update on that?
Oh, go ahead.
We do have new staff who are helping with that. One of the CAB membership stipulations in the charge is that we do have someone representing the business community. We thought Jake could maybe fulfill that if needed, even though maybe not a local business, but I did reach out to the business partnership and I think we got a few applications through that.
Great.
But it really helped when I knew that someone had applied, because I could say to the new person organizing it, this is the person I'm looking for. So if you happen to hear someone applied, please let me know so I can also just pull their applications to the top, as we're kind of going through a lot of backlog is what it sounds like.
Good. Well, so those were the leads I was talking about earlier, or referring to, potential that we haven't really dug into those, but maybe some possibility there. So just a couple of other items on my update, and then I will turn the floor over. So based on our last discussion, I think related to vice chair, there's a loose need, I'll say, for a vice chair. It's not something that is an every month sort of need, but for instance, those times when I have something come up, which generally I've been able to make it work, and Zoom certainly helps that. But just so I have a little bit of a safety net in case. Amanda and I were talking about different options there, given that I think there was not a huge interest by anyone on the currently on the board to fill that role. We thought about waiting or tabling it until we were able to fill some new spots, which I think is totally fine. However, just so that I know that if I for some reason can't make it, like my dog's in the hospital or something, which almost happened this week, that there's someone I can call on, and we don't have to postpone or what have you, and the board can go on. So our thought was to sort of have a rolling, just like we do with the clerk position, just have a rolling responsibility that for now, until we're able to add some membership and hopefully have someone take that on as a full-time or permanent type of role, at least so that I know I've got coverage. I suppose, if you really are averse to it, we can discuss. But it would be great if we could just at least have someone who's on deck just in case. 9 times out of 10, I'll be able to be available. Any thoughts on that? Seem like a reasonable alternative.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. If no one can commit to a durable appointment.
And we can just keep going down the list until we get the person who can be available that particular week. So, okay, great. And then the last thing, just to keep it, keep some connection with what CSEC is doing. Always good to help, them to promote the good work they're working on, being the other climate committee. So the Cooler Concord series continues. So May 25th, Your Sustainable Home Now on Zoom, which is nice. So it makes it really easy, low entry there. And then June 4th, looks like that is an in-person open house, but promoting EV. I'm assuming that's cars. Okay. But just so that would be in person, probably a little more hands-on, so to speak. So if you're able to make it, I was going to ask. I wasn't able to attend the events that happened on April, the last weekend in April. And Amanda, maybe you'll cover that in your director's update. But I'd be curious to get just a quick update on how that went and if anyone else was able to attend. With that, I'll hand it over to Amanda for her update.
Great, thanks, Courtney. I think the festival went well, just to spin off of that. And it was good to get back out and see people in person. And a lot of groups participated. And for somewhat deciding late in the game that we were going to have the festival, it really came together nicely. So thank you for those who were able to make it and helped promote the event. I'm happy to go into details on anything in the director's update. Lots of moving pieces here. So even things that are listed here have changed since we posted this. We'll talk about the fleet electrification study in a little bit more detail later tonight. And there's a lot of things that are sort of in the beginning and ending stages here as we sort of finish out the fiscal year. One of the things that have changed since the update went out here, we did receive our DC fast charger contract today. So we'll start to put that in processing, and as a reminder, that fast charger will go into Rideout Park in West Concord. Within the last month, we submitted our MVP action grant. So that was a good milestone. If we go to the next page, still some grants to keep our eye on. We've been doing some pre-positioning for some of the federal grants, especially the electric bus grants with the school, and talking with CMLP and trying to get our ducks in a row there. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention regarding state legislation is that the home rule petitions have been added to a bill that is in reconciliation, I believe, with the House and the Senate. You know, it could still be removed, but that is still out there, and there's still, you know, some hope. So we'll see if it's able to pass in this legislative session. A lot of the bills that, you know, had been tracking that were postponed for deliberation received an extension so that they could still be considered. But we are getting to sort of the end of the congressional I don't know if term is the right word, but we're getting to the end of their year as well before they'll start a new slate. So I'll pause there and just see if anyone has any questions on any ongoing projects. I'm happy to give some updates on anything listed here.
I have a question, even though I'm not a member. So Amanda, the select board has 8 grant of location petitions coming before us from National Grid. And I think that while the board, you know, considers replacement of infrastructure, natural gas infrastructure to avoid leaks and, you know, aging infrastructure, I think that when it comes to extensions or increases in capacity, that's kind of a different matter. And I don't know what our rights are, you know, given the utilities, you know, in the state regulation of utilities, but we do have this approval process. And I heard that you might be able to make an appearance relative to the public hearings for that. So I wanted to check in because I don't know that they'll all be coming up this Monday, but we, you know, will be deliberating on them over the next couple of meetings, I think.
Yeah, Chris Carmody did reach out to me. I think I'm in the same space as you, that I don't know the legal authority around that and what can go into denying or approving an application. I think our emission goals require that we electrify, which will ultimately likely result in the reduction of natural gas lines being laid, and that through Article 31 that said all new construction should be fossil fuel free. I think town meeting sort of spoke to not allowing or not being in favor of new natural gas hookups, but I think each application could potentially be different. Are they extending it for an existing building for safety reasons? Are they?
Right. And I have not seen the applications as of yet, but I just,
you
know, it would be nice to understand kind of how we could, you know, deliberate on these in light of our climate action policies. And I don't know, again, if we have latitude, but I will kind of defer to you in terms of setting the tone in terms of, you know, responding to some of these. And I think that the board, you know, is wanting to, by and large, support the town's goals here to whatever extent we can.
John, did you want to add in?
Well, I was wondering if it's possible to get guidance on the town's legal authority so that some appropriate procedure or policy can be set up for these situations. It didn't occur to me that, you know, the town might have some say on this. And I don't know, like when these applications come in, like if the site is already like under construction and the plans are done, which is then makes it awkward, obviously, to deny it. But if there's a policy or procedure in place that says we're not going to grant extensions or approve extensions, so you should consider an electric-based system, then that seemed like it could work well, but it seems like we need a sound basis for setting that up.
Yeah, the question is that effectively Article 31, and we've already kind of heard that we can't set a bylaw on that. So then the question is, okay, on an individual petition, so, I think it is quite specialized type of legal knowledge for this. So anyway, I just wanted to raise that because we do have this opportunity coming up. I think at a bare minimum, it's also worth raising with National Grid, what are their goals? I mean, they have stated at a corporate level, the same sort of objectives. And yet, we're seeing all of these capacity increases and extensions. So,
Matt, is this a normal order of business, or is this a
yes,
new...
it's a very, very routine order
So
of business. And
it always goes to the select board. Okay.
It always comes to the select board, but the focus typically is on, hey, coordinating with paving of roads, police details for safety, all of that stuff. It's really about conducting the project in an orderly fashion.
Or the logistics.
It's less about, demonstrate the need, the policy objectives and so on. Yeah.
Maybe
and yet I think that it's a relevant set of points.
Right.
I think our town council, is he still with Anderson and Krieger?
Anderson and Krieger still are town council.
Yeah, because Cambridge uses them also, and we've used them in energy related matters, so that I know they have some expertise.
Yeah. I think if we were willing to spend the money, we could do it.
That's the problem.
While we might not have the statutory approval to turn down an application, it's at a nexus where we could think about, so we can't turn it down, but maybe, I think about like the historical commission, right? You want to tear down your house, right? And they don't have approval to say you can't tear down your house. But what they have done is we're going to delay that. You've got to, so we don't lose the portfolio of legacy and architecture in the town. They have to develop drawings and photos, and it goes into an archive. Now, that's rather soft, I get it, but maybe there's something like that at this point, because this is the most critical path we're talking about, right? Article 51
That's right.
It's essential that we don't just continue business as usual and stamp National Grid or the homeowner's request to extend and put in more gas. Maybe it could be as perhaps you need to meet a certain efficiency requirement. Okay, so maybe we can't stop all that gas, but can we stop 25% of it? Or something like that, perhaps the legal review would tell us whether we're stepping out of bounds. But, there are a host of different things that might be able to be done other than just simply continuing to stamp the request to put in natural gas.
Well, I guess one of my appeals to Amanda would be, I don't know if you have a network of other sustainability directors or town staff, out there, and just have any of them address this with their municipalities. It just would be nice to kind of get some peer guidance as well.
Right.
Okay. Anyway, sorry, I'm not trying to derail. This is not on the agenda.
No. But I think it's important. I think it's important.
Relevant to the sustainability director's update. That's all.
Right. We do have a couple board comments. See, John, your hand's up. I don't know if you still have a comment.
Yeah, one more
Okay.
thought. If we, it's difficult to have town council work on this. There's a contact at the Harvard Environmental Law Clinic who who's from Concord, and she owns a business in Concord. as well as her work at Harvard. And it's possible they might be able to do some pro bono work on this. And then the other option would be the Conservation Law Foundation, who's been working on issues around sort of the legal structure and the difficulties it creates in dealing with this problem. And we have contacts there too. So
good suggestions. Yeah,
I could ask if that's
it'd be wonderful. I mean, again, if they can just put their hands on, oh yeah, we just have been doing that with this quality, you know.
Yeah, they may already know. Yeah, if someone could send me
if they
like
don't already know, then it's, first of all, it's probably too late. But it also, you know, might be a big project.
Well, but you could also set it up for a future filing.
Yeah. Exactly.
So someone could send me like a legal citation.
These come along all the time, by the way.
Yeah,
you know, we get them periodically. It's just that we don't typically get a batch of 8 of them.
Yeah,
at one time. Interesting.
Going in
Jake,
the wrong direction.
yeah, right.
Yeah, I just
Jake, you have a question?
I just had a question, like less on the legal side, more on the kind of visibility to these requests and whether, even if there isn't any sort of legal action or recourse, but just knowing that someone is applying or National Grid is applying on behalf of a specific homeowner or developer or what have you, is there any way that there could be an action taken by the light plan or others to try and direct people towards, you know, the electrification alternative? So I just don't know if and maybe that's too late, but it just seems like we need to use these signals, try and get ahead of these versus kind of chasing it or being too late, like it seems like we are right now. So just a thought for us to think about, and maybe Amanda, maybe you already know, but anyway.
Yeah, and I just learned about these last week. You know, we don't usually get a lot of lead time.
Yeah.
But that said, they always are coming. So.
Well, it's you know, it's something that we kind of talked about a little bit in relation to the Alcott boiler. Forgive me, I'll make the connection here, but you know, it's what do we do about those infrastructure decisions that are happening, have kind of happened for decades, right? In a certain way. How do we sort of circumvent and redirect some of those? And we've got history of that. So it's just a matter of, you know, continuing to chip away. And I think, you know, given that I certainly didn't know that these were happening, I'm not sure about, you know, if I could speak for the whole board or not, but, you know, that the select board is getting these on a routine basis, bringing light to some of those things, I think helps, not as a way to bring a hammer down, but just to start to collaborate on, you know, what could that redirection process look like, and making sure, you know, we're at least having the conversations. So Pamela, I do see your hand up. If you would respectfully wait until public comment period, that'd be awesome. We'll just get through some of our agenda, and then we definitely want to hear from you as well.
Brittany, the last thing that I'll say on the topic is that the DPU also had a study completed that was looking at how to basically decommission natural gas lines, and how the big IOUs would basically transition from not really supplying natural gas and thinking about how do we also safeguard maybe low-income communities that will be on natural gas longer from the price hikes, because they can't afford to electrify it. And it's a very dense study, but if anyone is interested in looking at that, I'm happy to forward it along.
Is there an executive summary?
Yeah, I think, and there is a summary table that is
okay.
at least give some of the
Yeah,
outline.
yeah.
So
if you
I can send that
if you
around.
wouldn't mind, I think I'd be interested in looking at the summary. Doubt I'll read the study, but okay. Anything else? Any other questions from the board for Amanda on her update?
I just noticed that in June, Michael is on the list to do minutes.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was an
So we can,
oversight.
so he
That was
can't
an
leave.
oversight. No,
obviously.
you
Yeah, really.
can't. You have to stay. You have one
Yeah.
more set you have to do. No, we will adjust. Except John, I think you would be the natural
Yeah,
candidate just to
that's-
move up. So
Okay,
so
I'll anticipate.
there you go. There you go. No, thank you for that. I think we were just a bit surprised. We didn't realize that Michael's term was up this month, so that's why it didn't get caught. All right, the last, I had just a quick question, and then we can move on. Or maybe more a comment. I see the UNH fellow will be starting end of May. Might be something that we could, because we could talk about this in a moment with the planning board, but maybe there's some opportunity to provide some assistance on some of that. But I know you were also looking at communications and engagement related stuff for that person as well. So
Yeah, they have a work plan that is somewhat, it's pretty much set, but we might be able to fit small things in here and there, I'm sure.
Okay, great. Well, we'll look forward to meeting that person once they come on board, hopefully. All right. With that, why don't we plan to do some quick check-ins, again, just in the essence of keeping the conversation going on these, but I expect a couple of these will be pretty short updates. But Jake, want to start with the home energy score?
Yeah, mine will be short. I really wasn't able to get much done in the last month, unfortunately. So
that's okay.
I do, Amanda, I do want to set up some time with you I think would be good for me to just like prep in advance of that, but talk through some options that I've been thinking about and just get your perspective to then kind of help set the direction of where I go next with this. Cause I think there's a couple of different options that I want to run by you as far as how we could think about this approaching home energy score. And I think now is probably a good time to do that. I have a little bit more research to do, but maybe in the next, I'll reach out and we can set up some time. But I think that would help me make some progress and figure out kind of the best next steps moving forward. So.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
No worries. Yeah, it's, we are just on a journey on these, right? So it's all good. And I will, take the next one. So we had sort of made a conscious decision to pause the conversations there in, I guess, respect of a town meeting and how hard the planning board was working towards some of the articles that they had on the agenda. So we'd like to start this conversation up again as well. And I can't remember if I mentioned to the group last time. I meant to. If I didn't, that the planning board chair, someone on the board reached out and mentioned that, as with many committees, they are looking for a couple of members in particular. Two that were rolling off have been sort of more climate connected, I'll say. And so they're, really looking to kind of bolster that again. So it might be something that we can look at, Amanda, when we are looking through those potential membership opportunities, that maybe there's a connection there, or a natural, liaison, someone who could sort of go between, if you will. So we will get that going. Although, I think the latest I knew is that they, the planning board had begun to look at some development guidelines from Lexington, correct? It was that one in particular that they were really interested in and seemed to be maybe a suitable fit for what we might want to do for Concord. So I think they were digging into that one.
Yeah, so I think the planning board has even started, they've looked at the site plan review document based on a few different best practices, and MAPC helped with that, but also Elizabeth Hughes would have done some work on that from the planning department. And I haven't looked at their recent agenda to see if that where they're at in the process, but I believe that the next steps were to get it closer to its final form, send it around to town departments to weigh in. And I thought at that time I would also send it out to this group just as a notification even. And if you have time to look at it, great. And if not, at least you'll kind of stay in tune with what's going on. And that does not need to go to town meeting since it's a regulation rather than a bylaw. And so there's also makes it easier to update later. And since we don't have any site plan regulation at the moment, it will certainly be helpful for the board moving forward, and is something that we can always come back to and isn't linked to that town meeting schedule, which can sometimes be a barrier.
Yeah. So even though there is no specific regulation, to put one into place does not require town meeting vote?
There's a site plan review bylaw that says the planning board can develop regulations that are have more information on what they're looking for.
Well, that's nice. That was thoughtful. Okay. All right. Paul, John, any updates related to climate vulnerability assessment?
No, I've been bad. So.
No bad.
But I blocked it on my calendar to work on the draft. So hopefully that'll make me do it.
You're retired now, so things can get shifted. It is okay and understandable. Okay, no, that's fine. We'll check in again. And so financing, Warren, you have made some.
So I think Paul raised his hand.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
No,
apologize.
Let's see. I mean, Amanda did submit a proposal to the MVP program. I think we all knew about that, right?
I believe so.
For a combined watershed model to look at flood control, drought, and stormwater. And it was a great proposal. And I guess we'll hear in July or August or something.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, and hopefully that will give us some additional information. We also are going to be doing our hazard mitigation plan update, which will include climate vulnerability and risk, and looking at solutions. And the more data that we have, the better. And they'll sort of be running in parallel, although we do need to finish the hazard mitigation plan by December so that we remain eligible for FEMA funding. So some of it's just it's going to be a continual process as we get better data. But there's better data already from the last time that we did it. And so we should be able to find out even more.
And the focus of that hazard mitigation plan is town facilities, right? So is that what I'm understanding?
You do look at critical facilities. FEMA has a new term that it's community lifelines. And so it's maybe not just your standard hospital, DPW facility, you can also start
Other
to look
things.
at other things. And I specifically requested that we also have some time to discuss like the economic impact. Like we're a tourism economy. We rely on our ecosystems to bring people into this beautiful place and other things like that. So hopefully we'll be able to go into some detail for the climate vulnerability assessment through that process.
Good. Okay. Good. That does seem like good ads, specifically for this community. So great.
Yeah. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot, but the last ad that we put onto that, in the MVP report and then the past hazard mitigation plan, we identified that the police and fire station are in the floodplain. And right now we don't have an understanding of where another good location in town would be. So the MAPC is going to help us do a siting analysis of what parcels in town are developable, which ones are in good locations, and then using like an envision framework for where it would be good to site that type of facility. And that way we can be a little more proactive in thinking through if we need to purchase land or use land that we have for that decision.
Do you know the, just curiosity, the date for the FEMA maps that is, encompasses Concord at this point? I know they're trying to roll out new ones, but do you know if they've done that yet for this area?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure if we're in the update or not. I can't remember. Okay.
Just curious. Okay. All right. Any other questions? When I'm sharing my screen, I can only see half of you at a time, which is a frustrating thing about Zoom.
I was wondering if it'll include CMLP facilities, including the distribution system.
Good question.
Yeah, and I had talked to CMLP a little bit about that as well, and to MAPC when we were doing like the scoping of work, and that it would be really helpful to do some one-on-one interviews with like the CMLP like director and the public works director, and really picking their brain about what those vulnerabilities are and getting that institutional knowledge documented. Because I think in a lot of cases they know what the vulnerability is, but we haven't maybe written it down.
Yeah. For most communities, they depend on the private utilities and they don't want to talk about it, right? But in this case, it's a town system, so it would be you get more out of the assessment.
Yeah. Good point. But it is, critical infrastructure. So, okay. Well, anything else on that before we move to Warren? Okay, Warren, you want to give a quick update on progress you've been able to make?
Yes, you can see a memo I put together with input and help from Michael and Amanda. We want to propose and have some discussions with CMLP about financing options that could be offered here in town and how CMLP could potentially help in making some of them happen. It is not going to be one financing program that will serve everybody. We currently have a really good program available to some people, the Mass Save Heat Loans program, which is available to folks who have natural gas, and it's ran up here. And what I did in this memo would both describe that and then describe some other options we've learned about and try to, in each case, include the advantages and disadvantages and some recommendations. And the goal would be to schedule a meeting with CMLP. They've seemed receptive to learning more about some of these things. But before I set up that meeting and Amanda sets up that meeting with CMLP, it would be good if any of you folks have either questions or suggestions about any of these options and things we should be talking about with CMLP.
Great. This memo is fantastic, Warren. Thank you so much for putting the time and effort into it. Any questions? Any initial questions? My guess is that people have done a very high-level review and still need to digest it a little bit, if I had to guess.
Does it make sense to give a high-level summary of the different options?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. I mean, the only reason I didn't is, you know, Courtney, you said we were just covering each of these topics very quickly, but I'm happy to give a high-level review. I won't say much about the Mass Save Heat loans, which are available to folks who have natural gas. That's a program in place. It's a great program. It's easy to use. Oh, wait, there are people who had questions here. Maybe we should go to them first. Jake first and then Brian.
Thanks, Warren. I think this is a great summary, and thanks to you and Amanda and Michael and whoever else helped put it together. I thought that the light plant also had a program that was matching the Mass Save loan programs that I don't see in this.
No, there were Mass Save when the utilities and the state decided to support heat pump installations, they put two things in place: rebates and loans. And there are rebates of up to $10,000 for installation of a whole house heat pump system. But that's a rebate program, and the town has said they're going to match that. Obviously, a rebate's even better than a loan. But the problem is that somebody can get a rebate and still not be able to move forward with an installation because they can't afford the upfront cost of that installation. And so the nice thing about the rebate, which the town is supporting for other technologies, still needs a loan program so that people can cover the upfront costs, so they're not having to take that money out of their savings.
Because that rebate is only going against kind of the equipment costs essentially, or it's only part of the installation.
It's only part of, you know, a heat pump installation. If you're doing a whole house installation, you know, it could be up to $40,000 or even more. And so now for some people, a $10,000 rebate would get you quite far along, but not for everybody.
Thank you, Warren.
Okay, and Brian.
Yeah, just to get to a summary, I'm curious, for a lot of the recommendations, it's monitor, learn more, wait and see. Knowing what you know now, which approach looks most promising to you at this point?
There are really two ways to evaluate these. One is which would be the best deal for consumers and which would get the greatest uptake. That's one thing. But then the second thing is which could actually be implemented in a reasonable amount of time. and I'll start going through some of these. The E&E program, the Energy New England program, that's really promising in theory. That would be great to participate in because CMLP already has an existing relationship with them. It could work relatively smoothly. CMLP would not need to get in the business of being a lender and providing capital itself. The only catch is it's just not clear how soon E&E is going to be able to launch the program. So if we put all that our eggs in that basket, we could be sitting around 3 years from now and it still not be a viable option. So that's why we should be monitoring what they're up to. We should continue to talk to them, but we should also explore some of the other options in case the E&E program doesn't come to pass. And so that's E&E. The next one, this is the only one that I'm recommending not to use this approach. Some folks have said, well, CMLP should just set up its own program and administer it, and just get the town to appropriate the money and hire the staff to do it. And if you do it in that way, you could offer it in a way that's optimal for consumers. You could do zero interest loans. You could make it very consumer friendly. The only catch is this is getting CMLP into a business they're not currently in. It would be a pretty heavy lift, I think. And they have a lot of other things on their plate, both in the climate arena and in terms of electricity reliability in the town. Personally, I think they should be involved in helping to get something launched, but if we want to rely on CMLP to do the whole thing, the town to authorize the money at town meeting, personally, I think we're going to be waiting a long time before something happens. Then the next one is MWEC, which Amanda, maybe you should talk to because you're the one who has had you're the one who's had conversations with them, and I really just summarized what you told me.
Yeah, for those who are familiar with E&E, MWEC is a similar organization that they have member utilities. We are not a member, and so in order to participate in their program, we would have to go, I don't know if it was the board of directors or to their governing body and ask for participation, and we may have to pay extra fees compared to their other members. The good thing about the MWEC loan program is that they have, they appear close to launch, and that they have a program that has set up that your payments are linked to your savings on your utility bills. And so that's a nice model. And we see that model in some of the others. There's some flexibility in how it could be set up, some potential administrative support, but logistically it would be more challenging for us to participate compared to their members, because they already do, for example, some of the billing for some of their members, and they wouldn't do our billing. And so we'd have to figure out what on-bill financing would look like, and which would also have an administrative cost to CMLP.
Yeah, but I think we should continue to talk to MWEC, see what's going on. If for no other reason than talking to MWEC may help light a fire under ENE, which we are a member of, to get EME to move faster to launch something. John, you had a comment or a question?
Not on that, so you should finish what you were saying.
Okay. Well, I was going to go on to Slipstream. Do you want me to keep going through the other?
Yeah, keep going. I just had a thought about block power.
Yeah, Slipstream is a national nonprofit. We originally thought that they were interested in entering the market and bringing capital, but they're really not. They have a lot of experience running efficiency programs for utilities, including municipal utilities in different parts of the country, especially the Midwest. They're interested in moving into Massachusetts. They've been talking to different players. They are a potential good candidate for being hired to run a program for CMLP and the town if we come up with something. For example, they've been talking to ENE, and it may be the case ENE would bring the money to the table. Slipstream would then be ones who could help administer the program and take that burden off of CMLP. But the other thing that came up with the conversations with them is it gave a sense of what was involved in launching a program. You know, they predicted that it would cost about $150,000 or $200,000 for the startup costs for the administration of an on-bill financing program. And they were pushing the idea of several MLPs working together to do that, because then you could divide those costs among the several MLPs. But, you know, I think that's good for us to keep in mind that somebody would have to come up with roughly that amount of money in either one town or several towns to make an on-bill financing program practical. Now, in the case of Slipstream, they especially promote the PAYS model, which is pay-as-you-save tariff, which is a model that's been promoted by several different people. It's been implemented in some parts of the country. And this is really not as a typical loan program. What happens is the utility, in effect, it's much more like an ESCO model in the commercial setting. The utility pays for, sorry, not the utility, who's ever running the program, and that can be the utility, pays for the improvements. And they then say, we've shown that these improvements to this person's utility meter is going to lead to a monthly savings of X amount, and we will pay off those costs over a 10-year period by putting a charge on the person's utility bill. And they'll save money each month because there's the cost of paying off the investment is less than the savings from the lower utility bills. So that works out well. There's no upfront costs for the consumer. The advantage for the utility, one of them, is that it's linked to the electric meter. And so if the person moves, the tariff stays with the electric meter, and the next person who moves into that house has to pay. And it also has an advantage because it's with the meter as opposed to the homeowner. It could work with someone who's a renter. So that's the story with Slipstream. We should keep them in mind, but they're really, if we're looking to if we have financing for someone and CMLP is looking for someone to actually administer the program. Block Power is a very promising company. They also go in and use an ESCO model. Their model is most easily applicable to commercial properties and multifamily housing. They have some interest in doing it with residences. They don't have a track record in Massachusetts. I think we should monitor this, but I think we're probably not the likely ones to be the guinea pigs. And on top of that, my charge on this whole thing was to look at residences and not look at commercial property. And John, you had a comment on Block Power.
Yeah. So as you said, Block Power is basically an ESCO. It is a private for-profit company. They've, I think, distinguished themselves. Usually ESCOs work in the so-called mush market with institutions and government, but Block Power seems to have cracked the code for multifamily housing, at least, with that with an ESCO model. But I'm wondering if we maybe might want to look at what the way they do it more from the perspective of what the city of Ithaca, New York is doing. So, I mean, Ithaca issued an RFP to basically decarbonize all their buildings. I forget how many, but thousands of buildings. I think it's something like 4,000 maybe. And Block Power had to submit a proposal. I don't know who else submitted proposals, but Block Power got the contract. I'm assuming there are single family homes that are part of the mix, and I don't know how Block Power is handling that, but I'm wondering if it might be useful to look at it from the point of view of looking more at what Ithaca did in terms of the RFP, and whether that's a vehicle to bring in someone like Block Power, or maybe Block Power and Slipstream compete or partner or whatever, or maybe there are others out there. Just keeping in mind that if we're supposed to be reducing at least by half by 2030, we have 8 years to do that. We're going to have to take some risks, right? I agree. In normal times, we have to be cautious about getting into something that might not work. But if we're really going to meet these goals, I think we're going to have to consider some outside the box approaches and maybe take some risks. Otherwise, I don't see how we're going to get there.
Yes, my understanding is the Ithaca model is extremely impressive. They've done an awful lot there. But the real secret of the Ithaca model wasn't that they issued an RFP, and it wasn't that they got Block Power. It was that the key person in Ithaca had connections to getting a large amount of capital that he brought to the table, so that when they issued the RFP, it was very attractive for people to move into that market because there's a lot of money to use, and we're not starting with that.
Right, but yeah, so they have a sustainability director who has experience in the private equity, private financing market, and he was able, through his connections, to get $100 million of commitment. But from what Block Power has told us in Cambridge, because we're starting to work with them, and we're not at the Ithaca level yet, but that it's going to take a lot more money than what Ithaca's raised to do what they're they want to do. I mean, we're talking in terms of like $2 billion, over time. But it may be that if Concord was going to go down that road, that we would have to think about, well, how can we do something similar to what Ithaca did in terms of attracting private capital to sort of jumpstart things. It's not like there aren't any people in Concord who don't know anything about this, about finance, right? So
Yeah.
I'd like to think we have some capacity to do that. It's not the world I live in, but I think we have. It might be a place we could do something, right, that sort of mirrors what Ithaca's doing. So I'm not saying Ithaca's got the greatest thing going. I think it's worth looking at it more and thinking about how and if it is applicable to Concord, because it seems to me that's kind of the scale we have to get to, right?
Yeah, no, you're right about that. But I also think there are two different things here. One is the Ithaca model and the other is Black Power. That they are not necessarily linked together.
Right.
That and maybe what the priority for the town should be is trying to figure out how to access private capital and the private equity markets to get a big pot of money to do what Ithaca is doing, and then go out with an RFP that Black Power could apply for, or a Slipstream could apply for, or anyone else.
Yeah, I agree. I think the starting point's really Ithaca's approach, or something, in that realm. And it doesn't have to be Black Power. It just, Black Power is like one of the few firms that, but I didn't know about Slipstream before, so that's interesting as well. But I think starting point is, well, what can the town do to move in this direction, right? And so I think what the city of Ithaca is doing might be the interesting thing to look at.
Yeah, well, and Michael, I will get to you in a second. This is something we should maybe put on the agenda for a future meeting, because it really is an interesting idea. It's something different than what my subcommittee was charged with, which was really how to bring low interest financing to the residential market. It wasn't talking about doing the level of installations that you're talking about and do something as dramatic as in Ithaca. And maybe we should make that a priority. But I would say if we were to do that, we should forget about most of the other stuff we're doing and just put all our attention into that, because that's a pretty heavy lift. And let me just say, at the end of my memo, there's sections on some other resources. There's information that Michael gathered from Holyoke. There's information about the Environment and Energy Study Institute, who's happy to be a consultant to us at no charge and provide us with advice. But that's what's in the memo. And, I'd like to suggest, Courtney, if it was oh, sorry, before I do that, I forgot, Michael.
No, I think we don't have a whole lot of time, but I think that the memo points out very clearly one of the most key features of a successful loan program is the sourcing of the money. E&E has some promise, I think, Warren, as you noted, because they're looking at sourcing $20 million from some legislation. MWAC is looking at a similar approach. The success of Mass Save is hinged on the fact that they use systems benefit monies, large amounts, to drive their financing and equivalent on bill. It may be that the Senator Barrett has been working on, and it's in one of the bills, and I think it might be in the ones that one of the ones that Amanda pointed out, but it establishing an infrastructure bank. The whole key to getting any kind of financing structure is securing the money. And, you know, as Block Power has done, they really haven't secured the money. They're administrating it, and they're administrating it with all the features that you'd want, like very low transaction costs and concierge services and handholding, and the list goes on and on. A very powerful administrator, but the sourcing of the money, as John pointed out, is actually come from, you know, a contact at Ithaca who apparently is in the hedge fund space. So it's starting with who in an organization that could deliver funding is where they can source the money, and whether it's a sizable amount. Holyoke, as pointed out in the memo, secured $1 million, and they deliberately said they were not interested in scaling it in any way beyond that $1 million, because they secured it from ratepayers by a systems benefit fund. And they got feedback from their customers saying that they really liked the funding service, but they had no intentions of increasing that. And when you look at the actual detail of how many homes are treated, what's the emissions reductions, you know, it becomes marginal, right? Because $1 million is just simply not adequate to get anywhere near the goals that have been set. So I don't know if there's promise maybe with Mike Barrett and setting up a serious infrastructure bank that might have that 100 million and allocate that across communities. And then we would ask the question, how would we administrate that? And wisely, I think Oren's pointing out that while nesting a really elegant financing on bill capability really should reside with your energy delivery company, which is CMLP, I think the wisdom recognizing that CMLP just doesn't have the resources and I believe perhaps not even the interest of going down in that direction. So
what I was going to suggest as next steps is if folks could get me, I guess the comments really should go back to Amanda, any comments on this memo in the next week. And then we'll reach out to CMLP to have an informational meeting with them, because I think one thing we need to do, and this goes back to what Michael was saying about their interest, we know it's highly unlikely that they are enthusiastic of themselves organizing and launching and administering a whole program. But for any of these things to work for the residential market, it really is going to be much more effective if it's linked to some sort of on-bill repayment system. And we need to see if CMLP wasn't being asked to basically be the lender, but would they be willing to be the promoter of the program, and would they be willing to support an on-bill repayment system? Then if we know we have them on board, then we could talk about what are the next steps in terms of either one of these options or John's more grandiose scheme or something else.
I think that seems reasonable. I totally appreciate the overview. For me, especially being a one who doesn't live in this space like you do, I think it was helpful. It'll help me to digest it more when I read it again. So that's a reasonable ask to get any comments or thoughts to Warren and Amanda, I'd say, within the next week or so. And then we can go from there. Michael, is your hand still up, or did you have another
No,
comment?
I just haven't taken it down.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. But with that, I wanted to give a little time for Amanda to do a quick review of the fleet study. But I think we should come back to this at a future meeting to kind of discuss more, and maybe we'll hear feedback from that meeting with CMLP. So let's make a point to do that. All right. With that, do you want to share your screen? Do you need to share your screen, Amanda?
Yeah, I think that'll be
at the back.
I think that'll be
easier.
Yeah.
Go for it.
And I'm gonna go quickly because I think we do have some public comment tonight. So I want to make sure that we have time for that.
Okay.
So in the beginning, I guess I'll just say happy to answer questions via email, but I'm sure we'll have some time too. So the town embarked on looking at their own fleet to see how it could be electrified and what charging infrastructure would be needed for that fleet. And this is some of the results of that study. As far as next steps, some of them are listed in the presentation. And I'm meeting with some of the fleet managers from different departments and the senior management team tomorrow to also walk through some of the findings and to discuss some of the next steps. So if there are any points that you'd like me to pass on to that group, again, happy to receive that tonight or via email or in the future, because I'm sure it's not going to be the last time we talk about it, because some of it is a little bit complicated and we'll need some more discussion. So to get us started, this study really had two parts. One looking at a vehicle analysis of what EVs are suitable, looking at the total cost of ownership, and that you'll see an acronym for the total cost of ownership, TCO, throughout the presentation. So just keep that one in mind. Thinking about the infrastructure needs in order to support that projection, and looking at the cost. So this should really help the different departments think about their capital infrastructure needs into the future. Across town, we have 227 vehicles across these different types. So we do have quite a few vehicles that don't have a perfect fit for an electric vehicle yet, like the off-road and the medium to heavy duty trucks. They're starting to come out, but they're a little bit harder to find. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But our fleet policy did say that all new light duty vehicles, so that would be like the sedans, vans, some of the light duty pickup trucks would need to be a battery electric vehicle by this fiscal year. And so we are embarking on that as well. To give you just a snapshot of where we currently stand for the municipal fleet, we have 7 electric vehicles, which is about 3%, and then diesel and gasoline really make up the rest of the fleet. And so we do have, we're just really started on this journey. This is probably actually even increased since the study was completed. And so it is something that departments are actively working on. This was our methodology. And although it looks like a stepwise approach, a lot of it is actually somewhat iterative. So you're looking at when you would need to replace a vehicle, looking at what vehicles might be a good fit, and if it fits your operations, and going back and forth on, because if something isn't suitable, sort of asking yourself, are we able to wait a few years when maybe the technology will be better? And so those are some of the conversations that throughout the process we've had with some of the different departments. Ultimately, this study ended up looking at 177 vehicles because there were some exclusions, and this was really to match sort of the scope of our study. Ultimately, 61, which turns out to be about 34% of those 177 are fit for electrification today with what's available on the market. We did separate out buses just so we could better understand their total cost of ownership separately, but also understand their greenhouse gas emission reduction separately. And their charging infrastructure is going to be mapped out in a different study. And then you can see there are some other options to either become more fuel efficient when some of the electric options aren't available, such as pickups downsizing. And so it really does look at a replacement timeline across the next decade, really. And this was something that we'll need to continue to update. This is where that total cost of ownership estimates come into effect. And so you can see across the different departments for the next few years, before 2025, many of the departments have vehicles that they will need to replace. In some cases, the blue, which is the cost of an electric vehicle, is less than buying the typical ICE vehicle or the internal combustion engine vehicle. But in other cases, it's more expensive. And some of that is related to the operational needs for those vehicles. And that what I was just showing was for those best fit vehicles. So again, what's available on the market today. And then for the potentially the ones that are potentially electrifiable, we did the same analysis. And I've got a few more graphs in here, but really just wanted to say that, again, these projections go out further than just the immediate term, so that we really can start to think about the long-term capital planning. Here's a graph showing how this will reduce our carbon emissions. So in 2016, the municipal fleet accounted for, I calculated this today, I want to say 8% of the municipal, it was either 5 or 8% of the municipal emissions overall, which do account for a small part of the community-wide emissions. But you can see how the different scenarios would relate to different emission reductions. But this is also based on some assumptions about the electricity in Concord, which would look different when CMLP does reach their goal of carbon-free power. Here's some just key findings. So ultimately, overall, across all departments, we do have 34% of the vehicles that can be replaced, and we will see some cost savings. Vehicle range is not a barrier to replacement. And then we're estimated to see a 39% reduction, even just with the best fit vehicles and the buses being replaced. Some of the challenges moving forward, we really need more data. That's a theme that this group hears. It would be helpful to streamline coordination between departments, better understand our return on investment, and really what the total cost of ownership is. We didn't have a lot of maintenance data, for example. Could also start to think about other ways to do route optimization that may also reduce emissions. And so we still have some continual review and a need to really stay up on the market as new vehicles become available for medium and heavy duty EVs. This is just a reminder that we have a fleet policy and some highlights here of what is in that. For time, I'm not going to go into detail here. And then for the infrastructure side of this study, it was really looking at what port ratings, like what level of charging would we need? And how many of those would we need? Would it provide sufficient energy during the dwell times of the vehicles? So dwell time is when the vehicle is not in use and it's sitting sort of at its home parking lot, if you will. And are there enough ports to support the fleet in that location? And so this is sort of analysis of the dwell time for each of the different campuses. And then at each of the different municipal buildings, how many ports are needed for each. And then this is also time scaled to think through as we add more to the fleet, when will we need to add the chargers? And so those projections walk hand in hand with the projections for the vehicle transition. And then it lists out by different building what type of ports we would need, how many we would need, and when we would need them. And this will also lead to some operational conversations. As we do share chargers, we will have to think through how to efficiently charge them, but also to start to think about what software we'll need, and then the last piece is really thinking about the electrical capacity in the buildings and on the grid to support these. So thinking about when we start to make upgrades to our heating systems as well, when we are updating transformers and electrical panels, that we're also taking these numbers into account. Just some more electric load information for those that like to dig into the numbers. This is for you when you get off. And then this is some of the costs, long-term costs associated with the chargers and with the building upgrades. And the project teams will really need to think about funding. Unlike the vehicles, the chargers, of course, don't have a payback. They're just something that we need to invest in. So thinking through, how do we do that? Do we want to centralize fund? Does each department do it? And also thinking about installation, and to date, many CMLP, the facilities, public works have all done a part in installing this chargers that we have today, and getting some feedback on what worked well, and do we want to set a standardized process. So we found out a lot of information, but we also found out what we didn't know. And so we have some more work to do.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. You did that in record time. Appreciate that. But it will take just a few minutes for questions if anyone has one. Michael.
Amanda, the data that's here is very rich. Where does school buses and school committee and the replacement of the school bus portfolio fit into all of this?
Yeah, so we do have some numbers on the data for like how much it would cost to replace the buses and the emission reductions. Because the cost is double basically for an electric school bus. We know that we are going to need some grants, and some of the grants require that your buses are of a certain age, which may also mean we hold on to some of our buses longer if we can, so that we can be eligible for grants. And so the buses are sort of their own beast. We do have an electric school bus working group that we've been meeting on, and we've got Brian on tonight, who also just recently did a study on the whole bus transportation system for the school. And so we've got a lot of good data. We are pre-positioning for the EPA grants that are coming out, and the Mass CEC grants. And so the timeline is also harder to predict for the buses at the moment, because we might end up doing, a bulk purchase rather than if we could get a grant for them, versus replacing them as needed, like the rest of the departments might do. But if we can buy them in bulk, we also need to have the charging in place for when they arrive. And so the complexity of that warrants the additional study, which is something that we're working through.
Great, thanks.
Great. Hey, John? Oh, John, did you have a question? Or are you taking off? Taking off. Okay, got it. Got it. Any board questions, and then we'll go to Brian. Okay, Brian, go for it.
Sure, thank you. So what data, I mean, you'd mentioned maintenance data was one of the things you noticed that was discovered as one of the unknowns that we need to fill in for data collection. Fueling data, we have a fuel master system. In my study of the schools, I found that the departments would have one card for, maybe like 5 cards for 35 vehicles, for the gasoline vehicles. Would it make sense for us to start issuing a card per vehicle so that that vehicle's consumption of fuel is directly tracked?
Yeah, I think that could be an option. I was just talking to
Would the information be of value?
So I think the other thing that is valuable is also the miles per gallon. And so I was talking to Mark Scribner about it yesterday. And he was saying, I think in Hingham, they have gotten these little devices that they are able to put into basically the computer of the car, and it will collect all the mileage data, all the fueling data, and then send it up into the software. And it did a lot of other things too, which I think would be really helpful. But some of it is also like the annual mileage currently requires that someone goes out and looks at every single odometer, because we're not tracking that in an automatic fashion.
Yeah, the idea of using, whenever you get an inspection sticker on a vehicle, they write down the odometer. And I've been told there's some way that you can access previous stickers and the mileage. Maybe that matched with a card per vehicle for the fuel master would give you a good estimation without investment into the data collection system, which has a pretty decent cost when you look at 200 something vehicles. But this is great. This is great progress. This is the next step is, as you know, as I mentioned every time this topic comes up, the point is to make sure that the town and its budgeting process looks at this fleet as its entirety when building the infrastructure, rather than doing a charger every time. So that's great. And I know you're going to talk to the department heads next. Once you talk with department heads and you get kind of a good answer from them, when do you think you'll have the report finalized? What's a good, comfortable timeline? I'm not looking to rush you. I'm just wanting to know when you think the final report would be ready.
Yeah, I would say we have the final. And so the data collection actually was quite challenging, and when everything came in a different format, the consultant spent a lot of extra time on that, and we actually did need to do even a change order to cover costs. And so we're at project budget. We've done some rounds of review. So the one that we have is final, so I can send that out to the group.
So the final report won't contain the decision on how we're going to manage budgets in town?
Not at this time. I have editable versions, so maybe we could add it in ourselves.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it if it was written down.
Yeah.
It can be in a policy, it can be in a memo. I just want to know that the town manager and all their direct reports have a plan on how they're going to manage funding for all of this work.
And is that sort of this next step where you're talking with different departments at this point to figure that out.
Yeah, because each department manages their own fleet at the moment. And so I think there's conversations around standardization versus centralization, and not only for kind of data tracking and updating this plan, but also funding wise, that could be standardized and centralized too, and what would that look like? So we do have some operational things to figure out.
Yeah, so that was a big component of my hearing presentation from 2020. So I just want to make sure that's written down, because if it doesn't get written down, we're going to have this conversation in a couple of years as we struggle to follow a plan.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Michael, quick question.
Very quick. I'm curious,
Okay.
if each department head is managing its own fleet, does each department head have a goal from the town manager of where they're headed in managing that fleet? Or are they just managing it and they can get around to it as they can? Or is there a point where on a timeline that says that the entire fleet is electrified by such and such a date?
I don't believe we have a date in mind. I think the sustainable fleet policy does lay out a framework for the replacement of vehicles and does provide some of the guidance. And it has a stepwise approach of you must consider battery electric first, and then it walks through. I think there are 3 or 4 other steps before getting to a standard ICE vehicle. And for the light duty vehicles, you would have to get approval from the town manager to buy anything other than a battery electric vehicle. And in that policy, there's also some guidance on not recycling vehicles between departments unless it is better than what they're replacing, which in many cases it probably isn't. And there's other things around even just reducing the amount of vehicles that we have and really being sure that we are purchasing the right amount, optimizing fleet size, trying to downsize the vehicles we have when we can. So I would say that is sort of the direction that folks have right now.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Amanda, for the update. This was great, and everyone can dig into that more. It's in the packet. But with that, given the time, I want to make sure we open the floor to public comment. Just if any of the members of the public could raise your hand if you do have something to share. That way I have an idea of how many. Okay, so with that, Pamela, I think you have some couple things. Hi.
Drit, 13 Concord Green. I applaud especially the vehicle work on electrification of the fleet. Yay. And the school buses too. Is there a way that we can, even though we can't legally require all electric remodeling and new construction, couldn't we strongly encourage it, especially if we had a document detailing the benefits, like having air conditioning in the hotter future, and the cost savings of heat pump solar with battery backup homes? Particularly, could we encourage the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals to have official positions encouraging this as a response to Article 51? We don't have to legally require it. We could still just encourage it. And could you come up with some creative incentives like we do for PRD developments for open space and clustered housing that would allow some of the buildings, like in the Thoreau district, to get like my support. We need to come up with some kind of creative incentives to promote all electric buildings, anticipating the possibility that we aren't allowed to legally require it, which means we've got to come up with some kind of, and wouldn't your group be a good place to do that?
So I think what you're asking is, is there an alternative if we can't take legal action? Is there some sort of incentive? And I guess I'll just open it to the group to see if there's any thoughts on that. Related to incentive, I feel that, we have talked about that at different times.
I think that the fact that the rezoning for Thoreau, Article 33, I think, failed is a real indication that it didn't have that. So that it couldn't be a really better system without it.
No, I appreciate that. And there may be some room for us to add that to our kind of our list of initiatives. We have a list that we're working from now, but that doesn't mean that it can't be added to for future. So it's something we can note down and
in the Zoning Board of Appeals, for instance, every time they get an application, couldn't they just, as a matter of fact, say, what kind of utilities are you planning to do for this remodeling? We encourage heat pump.
My guess is that, it's maybe a touch more complicated than that, but, I think it's something that we can continue and will continue to look into.
And I can say, Pamela, on any of the developments that staff review, a lot of times the larger developments in town that will go through site plan review, or some of the other reviews, will meet with town staff, and town staff get to ask them questions like that. And so last week I sat in on one of those and asked those exact questions.
Good.
What kind of heating system are they planning to use? And so it's not catching everything, but it's catching at least some of them at this point. But I think the planning board had some of those discussions when they've talked about site plan review, subdivision regulations. And so I think there's a general support for it in the community. And we need to find the way that fits sort of our structures that we currently have in place.
Fast.
Thanks, Pamela, for your comments. Are there any other public comments that anyone else wants to bring up to the table?
One more quick one.
Sure.
That, since there's nobody else raising their hand.
Fair enough.
Since there's about the natural gas requests to upgrade the infrastructure. That stuff we are being forced to pay for, and they are using that as excuses to replace instead of fix the pipe infrastructure system. And I don't think we should let them do that, because already the methane gas industry is lying about the costs of conventional power production by not using the actual cost data they have for the expected cost of electricity generation across the life of a power plant. And they're making it much lower than it actually is. Right now, the cost of new solar, wind with storage power plants, they're cheaper to both build and run than it costs just to run a conventional fossil fuel power plant. And that's right now. anything we can do to discourage fossil fuel infrastructure will save all of us lots of money in the future as ratepayers being forced to subsidize these stranded assets.
Well, I was pleased to hear Matt bring that to the conversation. It's a baby step, of course, but you know, it's a step, and it's a conversation that, you know, we weren't maybe having even a year ago. So so I hear you. I thank you for bringing the comments to the meeting tonight. Anyone else before we adjourn for this month? All right, just a reminder, we'll have a joint meeting with CSEC next month. We'll get the word out on the date and the time. I guess the time is set 6:30, but the date, whether it's a Wednesday or Thursday night, once we hear back from them on their possible availability. With that, can I entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
I make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Thanks, Jake. A second? Warren seconds. And I think we all said aye, but I understand we don't need to vote to adjourn. Michael, thank you again for your service, and we will miss you on these
and thank you too
calls.
for town meeting. You stepped in there. I know that was awkward and for Article 38, but you did it. You got there. And
yeah, it's the first time I've ever had to speak up in town meetings. So
it was excellent. So it made a difference, as you know, it passed. So
yeah, well, it seemed to pass with flying colors. So that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
We'll see what comes out of that, right? That'll be exciting. Great. Well, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thanks
Enjoy your
all.
week.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Michael.
Bye.